Mainstream mental health is flawed, and I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm Andrea Clark, a former family therapist who walked away from the system to expose the truth. After my own journey from medication maze to holistic healing, I'm here to challenge the status quo and reveal the mental health truths most people don't know. The truth about mental health is your radical roadmap to wellness. Raw stories, expert insights, breakthrough solutions. This is where traditional modalities end and real healing begins. Brooke Siem is both a chef to professional athletes and the surprising face of psychiatric drug withdrawal awareness and advocacy. Her book, May Cause Side Effects, won the 2023 BIBA Prize for Memoir and was named as one of Good Morning America's most anticipated reads. Her work on antidepressant withdrawal has also appeared in The Washington Post, New York Post, Psychology Today, and more. She is a Food Network Chopped champion, founder of the newsletter Happiness is a Skill, and creator of The Fuck It Bucket. I'm so excited for you all to hear from Brooke today. She has an incredible story that I think will open your eyes to what it is like to be a young person who is put on medication, to figuring out that's not the right fit for you, and to coming through the other side after antidepressant withdrawal. Let's dive into it. Hi, Brooke. How are you?
Hi, Andrea.
I am so ecstatic to have you today, and I cannot wait for people to hear this conversation.
Thanks. I'm excited.
Okay, so let's just dive right into it. I would love to hear a little bit about your book, May Cause Side Effects. I know it's a memoir, so we'll get into your story, but what compelled you to write this story and to start the advocacy work that you're doing?
I'll tell you the real story because the short version is we needed a book on the topic of antidepressant withdrawal and it didn't exist, so I wrote it. But that's the very, very short version. The real version is that I had spent 15 years on psychiatric drugs, 2 antidepressants, and then 4 other drugs to combat the side effects of the antidepressants. I was medicated when I was a kid after my dad suddenly died, and then I was pulled off the drugs recklessly. When I was 30, I got plunged into severe antidepressant withdrawal. I sort of knew what was happening, but now I have a lot more context for what was happening. But as I was healing, I got this bizarre opportunity to travel around the world for a year. So I was in withdrawal and about a year into withdrawal because it lasted about 2 years for me, but the first year was really the worst. But as I started to come out of that first year, I started to look at my life and the way I approached existence. And I realized there were some problems with that.
Yeah.
And one of the problems I had is that I was stuck in this very default no state. I was constantly saying no to things because for 15 years, I didn't want to do anything. I was still depressed. I didn't have any sort of curiosity. I couldn't connect with people. So I was so used to just saying no. And I was in Vancouver, Canada, and I was about 8 or 9 months into this year-long experience around the world. And I realized that people were asking me to do things and I was just saying no, and then sitting at home in my apartment doing a puzzle by myself. And I was just kind of like, what is even the point of what I'm trying to do right now if I keep saying no to things? So I decided to do this experiment where I would say yes to every yes or no question that was asked of me. And I had planned to do it initially for I think in my head, I was like, oh, I'll do it for a year and see what happens. But realistically, it didn't last that long. It lasted about 50 days because what happened was I started saying yes and I started writing about it. And it was very much like if the barista asked if I wanted cream and sugar in my coffee, I had to say yes, even though I don't take cream and sugar in my coffee.
Where did this idea, did this come to you, download to do this?
I can't remember exactly where it came from. I think it was just, I realized that after being medicated since I was 15, making choices through that lens of medication, I hated everywhere I ended up. Nowhere I ended up in my life was where it felt resonant once I got off the drugs. But I was an adult now at that time. I was 30. And when I was medicated, I was a child. And there was this weird realization that I had no idea who I was. And not only that, no idea how to even go through life, because it's not like I went back to a person I recognized. I got spit out of withdrawal, a completely new person.
Yeah.
Down to the type of music I like to listen to and the food I like to eat. It was so fundamentally life altering that I literally did not know. I couldn't tell you if I even liked cream and sugar in my coffee because I didn't really, everything was different. So I just kind of said, how do I lean into the complete opposite of what I've been doing? And it just seemed easiest to me in a weird way to just cut out any sort of thought or choice and just say, okay, if I get asked a yes or no question, I'm going to say yes. And I did this for about 50 days, and there were a number of pretty significant things that happened. But by the end of it, I was actually where was I? I was in Chile. Because I had said yes to going to South America. And I had a literary agent at the time who had helped. I had owned a bakery in New York City during the time in my 20s when I was medicated. And we had a cookbook that came out that had to do with our bakery. And I was having a conversation with the literary agent, and I was sort of telling her what had been going on in my life and the travel and the withdrawal. And she just said, well, do you want to write a book about this? I think I could sell it. And I just remember thinking, oh, shit. I have to say yes. And so I said yes. And then I realized, okay, I sort of just committed to this gigantic thing. I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that if I'm going to write anything halfway decent, I probably can't be at the whim of yes or no questions anymore. So that's when I ended the project and I focused on writing the book instead. And 5 years later, here we are.
I love that. So I'm curious, through the journey of writing this book and deep diving into your own life and probably a lot of research, right? Do you feel like you gained a lot of clarity on who you really are? Was that helpful? Was that part of the process for you or no?
No, not really. Not for me. I mean, a lot of people talk about writing being therapy for them. And I recognized pretty quickly that that wasn't what I was doing, because I had actually gone through a lot of the healing and therapeutic process beforehand. And I pretty quickly realized in writing the book that I wasn't doing it for myself. I mean, frankly, the process is horrific. It's unbelievably unpleasant. It's thankless. You make no money. There's no guarantee that it ever is going to get out into the world. I didn't want to self-publish. I was very clear on that. So I needed to go through the traditional modes of publishing. And it took significantly longer than I thought it would. And at one point I was just like, this isn't even going to happen. But for me, the guiding force was realizing that if a book wasn't written on this topic of antidepressant withdrawal and the way I was writing it, there would be a huge disservice to the world of mental and physical health, frankly, because no doctors could recognize what was going on. They didn't really understand it. They were, I've kind of gotten in a little bit, I don't want to say an argument, but there's a nurse practitioner who's in nursing school. I have the most trouble with people who are in school.
I'm not surprised.
Right, because it's like, you know just enough to think you know everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's
a personal attack for them. For people in general, right?
Sort of, yeah. She's interesting because she's been through psychiatric drug withdrawal and been seriously harmed by these drugs, but there's still an element of it that's like, oh no, we're being taught this. It's just, it's not being used in practice. And I'm kind of like, I don't know that that's true. I mean, maybe you're being taught this, but I've interacted with probably hundreds of prescribers at this point who maybe someone mentioned at some point that Xanax is habit forming and that they might feel crappy coming off of it, but that's kind of where it ends, right? And so I just realized that the part of the problem with withdrawal is not necessarily that doctors don't, and I use doctors as the catch-all for prescribers, but that prescribers don't know that it exists, because I think especially as the conversation is changing, they know it exists, but they don't know how to recognize it, and they don't know the extent of the impact and the length of time it can last. And so they're missing it. They think that because it's been 3 weeks since you got off your Prozac, if you're feeling crappy and you're having all these weird symptoms, that it's another mental illness or your depression coming back. They're not connecting the dots that this is something that is lasting months and years in a significant number of their patients, because that's not in the literature.
Right. Well, and not to mention, if we're speaking specifically about children and adolescents who have been medicated for an extended period of time.
Totally different conversation.
Well, and I believe, not that I have any evidence right here to share about it, but there's a lot of things that when you practice for a long time and you're around different types of people, you can make inferences. And I believe that there's an element there with almost like arrested development. The same way an addict has that if they started using really early in life. Mm-hmm. And I know from my own personal experience, my level of emotion dysregulation and immaturity and I wasn't even medicated Well, I was medicated for like probably 5 years and it around probably age 14 or 15. I know that it took me several years to really learn how to work through life. And part of that was withdrawal. And part of that was that I didn't gain those skills in adolescence because I was detached from so many things and just managing other shit, like for my symptoms. And so there's that piece to it as well, right? When we talk about younger people. And that's really hard. That is really freaking hard.
And we'll never be able to measure that in the lab, right? That's where this argument about evidence-based and trust the science just makes me roll my eyes. Like, you can't, so much of this stuff in the world of, I mean, I even hate the word mental health at this point. I just like it, but that's the only thing that we can, only real way to talk about it in a way that people will understand. But it's, you can't, there's so many things that we interrupt and alter when we choose to medicate kids, and no one can have a crystal ball that's going to tell us, well, what if we hadn't, right?
Right.
But when you're in this world for long enough, like you said, you start to recognize patterns.
Yeah.
And those patterns, I don't think it's not coincidental, right? I mean, I mean, I don't know if I've talked to a single person who was medicated under the age of, let's say, like, I mean, realistically, probably the age of 20, 21, but let's make it even more narrow. Let's say under the age of 16, was medicated under the age of 16, spent a significant chunk of their adolescent development on these drugs, and then somehow got off these drugs as a fully formed adult. So now, let's say after the age of 25, who hasn't come out of that saying that some fundamental processes of how they experience the world, whether or not that be sexual development, emotional development, psychological development, intellectual development, not a single person I've ever talked to has said that that wasn't screwed with. And the thing is that they might appear to be high functioning, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a disconnect that has happened. And God, I mean, also the number of people who are just like, well, I can get an autism diagnosis because of this. Like it's, and then you just end up back in the system, or ADHD or whatever. It's just, It's so obvious if you actually talk and listen to people and have been through it. And it's just unbelievable to me that I still have to have conversations with prescribers and even individuals who somehow think that their bipolar diagnosis was bullshit, but their ADHD diagnosis is real.
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry I'm laughing because I was having like long conversation with myself yesterday about this whole ADHD situation. And that totally made me lose my train of thought. To say something. Yesterday, I did an interview with an acupuncturist, and something we talked a lot about is how health, whether it's mental, physical, right, it's as if it's not done in these double-blind placebo studies, then it's not considered real. It's like, yep, just qualified, disqualified. And what he was saying is that you can't
swept in psychiatry,
right? But you can't even measure certain things that way. You can't measure certain that way, and I just think that it's such a disservice because there's so much evidence. There's practicing evidence. There's anecdotal evidence, right? But it's piles of anecdotal evidence, correlations, pattern, and it's all like, nope, if it's not done in blah, blah, blah this way, like it's not real.
But explain to me this catch-22 of psychiatry and mental health. The same people who will defend their diagnosis until the end of time are the same people who say trust the science.
I know.
Like when it comes to their drugs, then the evidence-based placebo-controlled RCT is the gold standard. All those buzzwords, regardless of the fact of conflict of interest or who did the study, the length of time versus the length of reality of time that people spend on it, et cetera, et cetera.
Shit, Liz, data being yes, there's so much.
But their actual diagnosis has zero scientific evidence at all. And yet somehow these two things exist at the same time. And it's just, the cognitive dissonance for me is, I don't understand it.
It's really tragic. And
I was in it.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being like that, right? Sorry to interrupt. So I think that people, like, I have to qualify that, right? Because I spent so much time talking about the advocacy around this. And I think people really forget that for the first 15 years of my experience as a, professional depression patient. I 100% believed I had a chemical imbalance, that the drugs were saving my life, that there was nothing I could do about it. I had fully bought in. And it wasn't until I was forced into withdrawal that I was like, oh my God, everything I've been told is wrong.
Yeah.
And now here we are. And people forget that I've lived on both sides. They just think I'm like anti-drugs or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think there's something powerful to that. In fact, I'm curious why you were bought it. That would be helpful. Like there's so many people who don't know that there's a different way of thinking and or they're allowed to ask questions, to trust their intuition. And I'm curious what made you buy into all of that?
Well, I was 15. I mean, what 15-year-old knows how to trust their intuitions or ask questions in front of an authority figure?
Well, I will tell you that I didn't buy into my diagnosis. And I didn't ask questions because I knew that that wasn't safe to do. But there was something inside me, and it might have been because I was angry, right? Like, I knew that my situation at home wasn't right. Like, I knew my parents were the problem or a huge part of the problem. And so when I got sat in front of a therapist or the psychiatrist, it felt like, fuck you guys. Why am I being medicated? You guys are acting like this. What do you expect? I'm upset. Like, you know what I mean? But I didn't say anything because I knew at that point there would be no, like, this was going to be, and I had to survive. And then that's why I took myself off when I was 19 in my freshman year of college. I mean, it was rough. Okay. Like, I took myself off and I was just like, I'm not taking these anymore. I'm out of the house. Like, I don't need to deal with this. But I think I do believe through my practice, because I used to work with a lot of adolescents, that a lot of them feel like there's yes, there's something wrong, but I don't think that it's like all my mental health and they have this inkling. So I'm not saying I'm not asking you that question in an accusatory way, but more just I'm curious because I think that it's important for people to hear this so that they know it's okay to start questioning it if they haven't. You know what I mean? Like, so, you're depressed, you need to be on meds. And you're like, okay, that's the best route for me. Is that kind of how that went for you?
Well, if we want to get really honest about what's going on with 15, 16-year-olds, right? So the first thing that you outlined in your experience was there was a power dynamic.
Yes.
At play there, right? And that's going to be the case with any 15 or 16-year-old who's living at home. Whether or not that power dynamic is accurate or healthy is irrelevant. It just is, right? Parents are paying for everything. I couldn't even drive myself to my first couple psychiatric appointments. So there was a level of compliance that happens, I think, with teenagers because you're not literally being dragged kicking and screaming. But you also realize that you have very little choice in a way in the matter, and you're not on your own. I was super resentful and angry for being taken to the child psychologist. I didn't want to be there. I started with a child psychologist and then got moved to a child psychiatrist. And for me, in the situation, my mother's perspective was that my father had died. I was an only child. So we went from a family of 3 to a family of 2. She didn't have any real support herself. Some friends of hers recommended that they take me to see someone. And so that's what she did because she thought she was doing the right thing.
Yeah, of course.
From my perspective, I was a very serious ballet dancer. So I was very used to being told what to do, complying, not showing any emotion. If you're bleeding through your point shoes, it doesn't matter. You still have to look like a pretty fairy on stage. That's the environment that I had grown up in. So that's what was very native to me, combined with the fact that I am intense and introverted and very private to begin with. And I had this wonderful, again, teenage paradox of both being extremely irritated by how much attention was being put on me. Like, I didn't want witness to the experience I was having in the wake of my father's death. And at the same time, I wanted to feel special and like, yeah, something is wrong with me. Like, I am this fucked up, right? That I need medication. So there was this, I don't really know how native that is to me versus other teenagers. I don't have children. I've only been a teenager once in my experience, but I do think that there is that tension in young people where they are kind of realizing that they're not that special, that their problems aren't that important, that the world doesn't revolve around them after the world revolving around them for most of their life, while also really wanting to be a part of something, wanting to find a way to be special and feel like their pain is valid. And that's pretty much just an absolute Venn diagram of hell for psychiatry, because you're just taking people who are already in this very interesting state of mind, who are also don't have the life skills to look at this through a bigger lens, whose parents are terrified that they're going to kill themselves, because apparently that's the fear that all parents have now, because we instill that in them. Mm-hmm. And then you walk them into a situation where a person in power says, if we don't treat this, it could be dangerous and your whole life could go off track. So here's some Paxil, here's some Effexor, here's some Prozac. Oh, you can't pay attention in school? Here's some ADHD. And if you can't sleep, here's some Xanax to help you sleep at night. And everyone is wrong if they don't do it. So you hit all of these very, very salient points in the experience of being a teenager, while also hitting on the fear of the parent.
Yeah. I think it's really hard. And I think that the other piece there's the biological piece and what the chemistry piece of what medication does to you. But there's also this identity piece when you're told, you're depressed, you have depression, or you have general anxiety, you have bipolar disorder. I mean, the amount of people who DM me, or when I was a therapist practicing, sit on my couch and go, I have bipolar disorder. And
I can't do anything. It's out of my control.
Well, yeah, and it's how they introduce, and I get it. I was their therapist, but it's how they introduce themselves. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and it's I have bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
I have and I'm just okay, but that's not who you are, if that's even true, right? And it's taking on this label and then making meaning about everything you do and everything in your life from this label. When if you look at the DSM for what it really is, it's anybody could overlap with almost any disorder.
Yeah, constantly.
I have 1 million of the DSM disorders. If you really look at it, right? Because I'm a human living a human existence. And I find that so disheartening and so problematic. And yeah, so I can see how that would be affecting you. I know for me, I spent a lot of my life trying to prove to myself that I didn't have bipolar disorder. And that was a huge part of my identity. You know what I mean? And so that, even though it wasn't the same experience as you were, it's yes, I believe this. Me spending all this time trying to prove something wrong was a huge piece of my identity and a problem for me. If you have a neurodivergent or sensitive kiddo who experiences big emotions and are looking for a way to help them decompress, get grounded, and self-regulate, you've got to check out Outtree. As a therapist and mom, it's my go-to for sensory soothing tools. My daughter loves their sensory swing. After a long day at school, it's her favorite for relaxing and getting focused. It's a safe space to down-regulate her nervous system. You can find the perfect sensory tool for your kiddo and family at Outtree.com. OUTREE.com. Use my code MHM for 24% off. You can also check the show notes for the link. How long ago was your book published?
The hardcover came out in 2022 and the paperback came out in 2024.
Okay, cool. So what's your journey been like talking about this with people and in your advocacy work? How has that been? Has it been received well, or has it been?
Right, you're catching me at a really interesting time with this work, because I am tired.
Yeah.
It's been 9 years of advocacy on some level for me, and it's never been full time because it's never been money. I've never made money off of it. I mean, I've made a little bit off of a speaking engagement here or there, or maybe, I'll have a consult with someone and they'll toss me $50, but there's been no level of no one's mortgage is getting paid off of what I'm doing. I mean, my groceries and gas aren't even getting covered. Effectively, everything I've been doing over the past 9 years has been more or less volunteer work.
Yeah.
And therefore, I have a real job that I need to do and, hobbies, and I want to see people. And so this has been, I don't even want to call it a labor of love, how much it just feels like a labor of obligation. Up until this point, I've felt like if I didn't do it, no one would. and we need, like, I needed to. I'm starting to shift to a place where I'm seeing more voices in the space, and there are more people talking about it. It's a little bit of a gold rush right now. People are trying to make money. That the idea of that just makes me tired. And so I'm starting to think, like, is there the thought that's running through my mind is have I done enough here? Like, I may have pushed the ball at the top over the hill or been a part of maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 people who did that, but more people are going to take it the rest of the way. I don't know that the rest of my life is dedicated to the advocacy work in the way I'm doing it right now and have been doing it. There are other ways of expression around this that perhaps I may go into, but there's an aspect of this for me that's like, this has been defining my life in one way or another for almost 25 years.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering, like, maybe I just get to go enjoy life a little bit now. There's an aspect of that feels a little like, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but it's just, I think it's kind of maybe like letting your kid go off into the world and fend for themselves. Like, there's only so much you can do. And sometimes, I'll get these really, in my interactions with people on the internet, I would say it's 95% positive in the sense that people support what I do. Yeah. Every once in a while, I get something super irritating. And it's irritating to me. Like, the people who are just like, you're dangerous, that doesn't really bug me because I know they're just like, they don't really know what the hell they're talking about and they're just in fear. The ones that bother me are the people who are like, oh, well, I spent 45 years on diagnosed ADHD and now I'm taking Vyvanse and my life is so much better. And so, like, you're wrong. It's just kind of like, you're really not getting it. Like, you are so not getting what we're talking about here. Children versus 45-year-old, wildly different thing. You're a consenting adult. They're not. 2, like, yeah, everybody feels better on Adderall. That doesn't mean that there's a diagnosis, right? So, like, let's just acknowledge it for what it is. I don't care that you're taking Adderall, and if it's helping you, great. But let's get really honest about what's going on here, because you're just perpetuating this notion of sickness. And a drug affecting you does not mean that there is a disease. Me liking what it feels like when I have a glass of wine does not mean that I'm ill when I'm sober. Right? So those are the things that really get me, because it just shows how deeply rooted and almost, Goliath this narrative is. And it just makes me really feel tired. And that combined with the fact that, yes, 95% of what I get is positive, but I'm not getting success stories. I'm not. I'm mostly getting told horror stories. People reach out to me with their experience and it's always bad. It keeps getting worse. Like, when I think I've heard the worst thing I've ever heard, somebody comes in with something that blows it out of the fucking water. And I'm just like, this is so pervasive. It's happening all over the world. And the people who are reaching out to me aren't reaching out because they're like, oh my God, I went through the same thing as you. Here's this horrible story, but I'm great now. My life is amazing. I'm thriving. That is not what they're saying. They're saying, this horrible thing happened. I've been stuck on these drugs. I can't get off them. I can't stay on them. I'm losing my marriage. I'm losing my job. I'm losing all these things. I'm losing my body, my autonomy. Nobody believes me. What do I do? And I don't have an answer.
Yeah, it's hard.
And the only answer I can give is like, well, this is my experience. This is what worked for me. By the way, it's going to take you years. At least or maybe it won't. But again, people aren't reaching out to me because this is clearing up in 3 weeks.
Right.
And there's just an angle of it that's just, it's so heavy. And even though it's not my whole life, it takes up most of my emotional, like, it's just kind of this little weighted blanket I'm wearing all the time. And I don't know how to keep providing good and hope in the world while also being light and airy myself.
Yeah. It's really heavy stuff. And it, like you said, it's so big. And it's so pervasive. And part of why I waited so long to create this podcast and share my story the way that I do is because I knew that. And it was like, I just was like, do I really want to deal with this? Yeah. Do I really want to do? Because if I do it, I have to really do it. And if I really do it, it's going to be intense and it's going to be never ending, just more bullshit and more bullshit and more bullshit. It's like never stops. And so I have so much compassion and empathy for you, and also just gratitude for what you have done all of these years. You know what I mean? And I do think that you're correct. Like, there's people who are starting to feel like it's time.
Mm-hmm.
right? It's been enough of a conversation where, I mean, you're a pioneer, right? It's been enough of a conversation where other people feel like, okay, I have a leg to stand on and I can do this advocacy work too, or share my story or whatever.
Mhm.
And so you've paved a path for a lot of other people. And I think if you decide to majorly retire that advocacy hat, nobody would blame you. Everybody would understand, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's complex. Yeah. Okay. I have a question about the happiness as a skill,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that happiness and joy is a skill as well. Like, this is something I talk about with people all the time, is if you want to have certain feelings, you have to work at cultivating those feelings and cultivating a life that helps you create living in that state, right? And so you can have hard things happening in life and still experience joy, and it's a skill set. Emotion regulation is a skill set. Like, being able to work through hard things is a skill set. Distress tolerance is a skill set. And so I'd love to hear from you. What made you, it's a blog, right? Is it a blog?
I have a Substack, yeah.
Okay. So, and then the fuck it bucket. Will you tell us about those two things?
Sure, I'll start with the fuck it bucket. That came first. The fuck it bucket, it was just this idea I had because, again, coming out of withdrawal, there's kind of along the same lines as saying yes to everything. It's just I needed to learn to cultivate lightness and curiosity and openness to new experiences, and I had to do that in a very serious way. I had to make rules. I had to tell other people about it to keep me accountable. I had to basically say, I really don't want to do this, but what I'm doing isn't working. So this feels really hard for me, but help me do it anyway. And I called it the yes quest. During the yes quest, honestly, most of the things that I had to say yes to, I wasn't all that thrilled about. And I didn't necessarily, I remember going to this concert I really didn't want to be at. This music I hated, and I was just like, why am I here? This is such a waste of time. I just want to be home with the puzzle. And there was an element of going against my nature. What happened with is it just started rewiring my brain to look to say yes in general, but to just look for another path and to be open and, to the major things that came out of this. I mean, the book is one of them, right? When my literary agent asked me if I wanted to write this book, the real answer was no, that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of unpaid work. But by saying yes to it, I started to get into the practice of writing, and it became something that mattered. And you don't know that when you start. Another thing that came out of the yes quest is I had been asked if I wanted to babysit this cat. I was allergic to some cats. It was in another area of town. It was in this dark basement. I didn't particularly want to cat sit, but I said yes for 3 days, and it put me in a completely new area of town. And then I got also at the same time, therefore went to a sushi restaurant nearby this other place that I wouldn't have been at. And there was a whole amusing conversation around my yes quest and ordering things off the menu that I didn't want to eat. And then 2 people sat down next to us, and I ended up in a relationship with one of them for 5 years. So the point is not that the thing you say yes to or the new path you open yourself up to is the immediate answer. It's just the fact that it pivots you 1 degree in a different direction, and you don't know what is coming from that. And if you can recognize that by not staying in the same path and the same grooves you built for yourself, you're immediately just going to encounter new things. And that's more of the abundance mindset, is kind of looking at the world and saying, dazzle me, show me new things. That's where I started building the skill of happiness. It wasn't so much about being happy in every moment, especially in the beginning, because that was far too advanced. Mm-hmm. Gratitude's an extremely advanced feeling. It's presented to us in a way that's just write your gratitude journal and just be thankful for all the abundance. That is so far down the line in healing. You have to clear so much crap out of the way and have so much practice time of just noticing what it is like to just not even feel good, but to not feel bad.
Yeah.
And you have to notice that first. And then that's when you start noticing the little cracks of light that come through. And then you start to notice just that one tiny feeling, like you just made yourself a cup of coffee and you just walk by it and kind of say to yourself, man, that smells good. That's an act of gratitude, but you don't recognize that right off the bat. You have to work your way into that and learn it and get out of those grooves you've built. And then after a while, the groove you start building is the groove of gratitude, or call it happiness, which is such an ephemeral like thing anyway. But it doesn't really I don't really think happiness has anything to do with the state you're in moment to moment. I think it has to do with the collection of states you're in over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, what I'm hearing, I know from my own experience, is actually being present. You can't experience gratitude. You can't create happiness for yourself over time if you stay in the old grooves, right? Mm-hmm. And you're kind of just walking through life pretty much dissociated in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like this yes quest, which just sounds really awesome, help take you out of autopilot, right? And survival mode. And I can only imagine the skills layered into the different experiences, because just because you said yes to something doesn't mean it was, like you said, the concert. So you had to work through uncomfortable feelings and probably some distress tolerance and just and the more and more we do that, the more we feel competent as a human being. But also for me, when I can work through distressful things, it gives me the confidence that I can also help cultivate other states of being for myself over time, right? Because working through distressing things is a skill that then the extension of that is, well, I can cultivate other ways of experiencing and embodying emotions and life and states of being and all of that. And so you can't have one without the other, I don't feel personally. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you did that through this yes quest, it's a really powerful story. That in itself is a really powerful story. It's really cool. It kind of gives me chills. It's
yeah, if I had actually done that longer, it would have been a really good book. But 50 days wasn't quite enough. But still, it changed it changed my entire life. It's just it didn't do it in an obvious way. I mean, I guess it was the fact that I ended up meeting that guy. That's what really changed my life. Completely changed the direction of where I was going.
But think about, you had to make a lot of decisions leading up to meeting him. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something that people don't understand, is our decisions matter so fucking much. And it doesn't mean every decision you have to be like, what's going to happen if but we actually are very much active participants in our life, whether we know we are or not. Even people who feel life is happening to them, in some ways it is, but in other ways, even if you have that feeling and that's the lens you operate from, life is not just happening to you. You have the option to say yes or no. Mm-hmm. And that yes or no can create a whole domino effect and take you on different pathways, timelines, whatever, for me, I think it's timelines, but can take you on different paths, and nobody is 100% helpless, at least after they become an adult, right?
Yeah.
Being 18 is a completely different situation. But so I think it's incredible, because you could have kept walking through life saying, well, I'm just depressed and I have to be medicated and this is just the way it is. And I sit and do my puzzle and hibernate all the time. And you didn't do that. And that's really inspiring. That in itself is incredibly inspiring.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about I don't know, I'm not saying this in sort of like an egotistical way, but I just mean like what made me different. Because again, I interact with so many people who are really still stuck, not just I'm going to say specifically in withdrawal. Like they're so run by the fear of the experience that they kind of can't get out of their own way. And I don't understand why. Yeah, I had all that fear too, but I did it anyway. And I don't know how you get that second part. I think some of it is just baked into me. I mean, I feel like I have an, absolute, call it an Achilles heel or a huge gift, in the sense that I just refuse to do what everybody else is doing. So if everybody else is going left, I'm going to go right, simply because everybody else is going left. Even if right is going to send me off a cliff, I'm going to go that direction anyway. Like there's just a level of questioning what's happening around me, that when I realized how much these drugs were affecting my whole system, which was about 3 weeks into withdrawal, I got so angry because I recognized very quickly what I had been robbed of. And that anger was enough for me to basically be like, fuck the doctors, fuck pharmaceuticals, fuck Fexer, fuck Prozac. I'm not touching this ever again. Even if, I mean, honestly, even if I just like, it gets to be too much and I kill myself, I was like, that is more worth it to me than giving in to what has happened to me. And that's because I'm competitive and stubborn and angry. So I think that that's kind of maybe some of the ingredients that helped me get out of it. And if you're someone who's a bit more passive and a people pleaser and just trying to be a good girl all the time, I think it's harder in a way. And I don't really know. I don't know. But I also think this process will teach those people how to stand up for themselves real quick.
Well, absolutely. Here's the thing. I mean, I think personality does matter. Personal conviction, which is really a big part of personality, right? I mean, it's obviously your environment does help shape that, but like I was the kind of kid that I would rather sit alone than be with people who treated me like shit, right? And so that's not a typical adolescent, like, and so that type of conviction that I feel around certain things has carried me through hard times. Like, you were a ballerina, right? You know that you can get through hard things because you did that. And there's probably many other things in your life that I don't know about that would fall in that same vein. And I think that there's a lot of people out there, number one, who are taught that they can't get through hard things, whether it's through things that their parents or siblings or other profound people in their life as their subconscious is being shaped. They're taught like you can't get through hard things. My husband, and he wouldn't care that I'm sharing this, is a perfect example of he grew up being told like he's incapable and a more passive person. And he's working through that now. And he has a very loving environment to support that. But he would never let himself feel anger. Anger is such a powerful emotion that helps us move. It helps us move through hard things. It helps us think, what the fuck is going on here? This doesn't feel right.
The boundary.
It's about, yes, that's a great way to put that. And anger helped fuel you through your healing process. And anger helped fuel me through my healing process. And saying, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get off these fucking meds. And quite frankly, I really didn't know what I was doing as 19, right? Like, I didn't know the withdrawals. And trust me, my first 2 years of college were horrific because of it.
Yeah.
Especially the first year, 6 months, first year. My gosh, I look back and a lot of that makes sense. But there are people who feel like there's no way. Like, they're taught to not trust themselves or let themselves feel those types of emotions that are going to support them on that journey of feeling convicted, like, this is what I have to do. And that's really fucking sucks because so many people are in the place they're in because they don't feel safe to move with that conviction. Washed in them so early on in their life. I've questioned the same things, and that's at least my personal hypothesis of why, right?
Yeah.
Is passivities is something that's, some of it's personality, but some of it's taught for survival.
Yeah.
I
think that also really comes back into the medicating kid angle versus, medicating the 45-year-old. It's that if you had 45 years of feeling uncomfortable in your own body and someone gives you a drug that makes it go away, there's an angle of relief there where you might not care about whether or not that drug is going to give you dementia in 20 years. You might just be thrilled to not feel that way. And, maybe you've done the work in other ways. Maybe you haven't. That's kind of irrelevant. But with a kid, what you're doing is you're putting cotton over their experience during the time when they learn to experience discomfort. And that discomfort can be the discomfort of having to learn to pay attention when you don't want to, or learn to be sad, to learn that if you're being more dramatic, like this is a personal experience thing, like learning where the line is on drama, right? Because as a teenage girl, I really enjoyed kind of the shock factor of being a mess and then having to find that line between like, is this effective or not? And I think that that's kind of where I got a little bit of Arrested Development, is where, for me, if someone saw how much pain I was in, it would validate how much pain I thought I was in. And so we just stayed there and based relationships off of that, right? Because I was medicated at a time when I didn't get a chance to work my way out of that level of pain and shock and grief. So I didn't know what it was like to come out on the other side. I just stayed there and thought it was my personality. you know? So whatever it is with kids, like the whole point of being young and still living at home and hopefully in an environment where you're protected in the ways where it really matters is to be able to explore the edges of yourself with bumpers and to slowly expand those bumpers as you get older, not for an adult to be like, oh, you're too much. Just, here's some fucking antidepressant. Like, we're just going to take your edges off because that's the right call here, because that's not what's happening. We're just putting cotton. We're just dampening those things for people. And long term, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't. And this is something I was talking about on another episode, is a big piece of this is parents being okay with discomfort.
Yeah.
And not worrying that, like you said, oh my gosh, my kid's going to kill themselves because they're going through a season of deep sadness or depression. Like, everybody experiences depression at some point in their life. You lost that's an event that happened to you. And it's hard because either parents don't have the skills, right? They just don't know how to deal with it. Or they're uncomfortable with it. This makes me think of the other night when my daughter, she made a poor choice at school. She's 11. She made a poor choice at school and she told me about it. And then she felt like some guilt and shame for the poor choice, all on her own accord. And she asked me if I was mad at her. And I said, no, I'm not mad at you, and you're experiencing the natural consequences of your choice, right? And then she said, I'm really sad. Is it okay that I'm sad? And I thought that was so interesting that she asked me if it was okay that she felt sad. And I said, absolutely, it's okay that you're sad. Sadness is a part of experiencing sadness over things is a part of life. We're born with the capacity to feel it. I said, it'll pass when it's ready to pass. Like, just feel it. Let yourself feel it. It's okay. And she's like, okay. But I don't know where that came from, but she questioned if that was an okay feeling to have. And so what if I had told her a different answer? What if I said, I don't know. Well, we don't want to be sad for too long or whatever it was, right? Because I'm drunk. And that's the hard thing. No parent is it's not a manual, and we have our own experiences we bring into parenthood. And I just wish that there was more resources for parents that they could know that it's okay that your child is having the gambit of emotions. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. And if they can't sit still in school, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with them, right? Or that the priority is to please the teacher. Because that's a huge thing, right? There's so many layers to this now where parents just feel like they can't win or something's wrong.
Yeah. I also feel like this is just kind of a perpetuating cycle, right? And because well-adjusted people are not raising, or parents aren't well-adjusted either. And I mean, like, whatever word you want to throw on it, it's just like, and you can't discount the amount of, how much more difficult it is to just be a human now than it used to be, right? I mean, yes, things are wildly more expensive. There's more information. There's problems. It's harder to get decent food. Even if you get decent food, it's still filled with crap, right? Like, there's so much more. Yeah, the game is harder than it used to be. It is. But that means that you need to level up. Not that you need to keep pretending like it's the 80s when we were kids, right? It's just things are different now. Like, it's adjust or die, adapt or die. That is evolution. So adapting is not throwing a pill at something because it makes we can put it away. It's not putting an iPad in front of your kid every moment when they're upset. Like, that's on the parent.
I'm really glad you said that, because this is my perspective and parents get really mad at me.
Yeah, of course, because it makes them really look at their own shit and take personal responsibility. And also, basically, they interpret it as shame, which is their own shit.
It is. And so that's when I talk about this. This is one of the things that I'm really passionate about. And I share it in reels and I share it in the podcast. And I'm just like, nobody's shaming you. I'm bringing awareness so that you can make a decision and you can decide to keep on trucking this way, or you can really take radical responsibility. Because at the end of the day, whether I do things in my parenting from a place of ignorance, a place in my own drama, trauma, whatever the fuck, or I still have to take radical responsibility for the choice. Like, your mom she was doing the best she could.
Yeah. But she wouldn't make the same decision now. And that's the difference. There's reflection and pivoting and changing and adjusting.
Sure, she's taken responsibility. Like, I did the best I could, and I was maybe doing it out of a place of the best I could in ignorance. But I want you to know I'm taking responsibility for that choice regardless. And really what we're trying to say here is nobody needs to shit on themselves and shame themselves. In fact, that doesn't motivate anybody. Just take a look. And like you said, it's time to level up. The world is different. The pressures are different. And it's okay to ask questions and not conform to whatever, because it'll help us all keep trucking. Like, we're not on this planet to just keep fucking trucking. Like, what? I don't know. And so that's a huge piece. Yes, parents lack skills and they're not well adjusted themselves. And the pressure that a lot of people feel that they just need to give into is just insane.
Yeah.
But it does build their pressure that they get to say yes or no to.
Yeah. I have a little example for this that I think is just, I was so impressed when I heard this. I've got a friend who he's now a single father because he and his ex-wife got divorced. But before they got divorced, they had adopted 2 kids, and the parents are white and 2 kids are black. And the kids come from, rough backgrounds. Neither parent is, they're either jailed or they're not available. And the little boy just had all these behavioral problems. And by the time he was 7, a child psychiatrist had him on 5 different drugs: an antipsychotic, an antidepressant, a blood pressure medication, Adderall, and something else. I can't remember what the 5th one was. And I happened to just be talking to the dad and kind of just started to point out, like, this is like, do you have any idea what's happening here? And he just didn't know. He didn't understand because he just was listening to the doctor, right? But as we started talking, started to realize, like, oh shit, like, why is my 7-year-old on an antipsychotic?
Right.
And like 5 different drugs for a 7-year-old, given the background of this kid, right? And so over the past couple of years, I've sort of been helping them a little bit. They've tapered the kid off. He went through withdrawal. He was like an 8-year-old having akathisia. Like, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. But the kid is so smart and he wants to be a good kid, but he's got a lot of anger because some of it's who he is and some of he's aware of his situation.
Yes, trauma.
Yeah. And so he's just been on this like really amazing upswing and track as consistency has been introduced in sports and all these very obvious things. But I asked the father, because the father has this attitude that's also very much like, okay, like, you're going to take your bike and you're going to go to the grocery store. You're going to take my credit card. You're going to figure it out. It's like, go out into the world and figure it out. And it's a very different from the helicopter parenting strategy that we see a lot. And from the, I'm worried that my kid is just going to die all the time strategy. When I asked him, I was like, do you think that your strategy for raising your kid, like this sort of ability to just let him go figure out the world, even especially knowing that he's a kid with behavioral problems, right? Like that's a huge level of trust. I said, do you think that comes from the fact that he's adopted and it's easier for you to have that separation? And he starts laughing. He shakes his head and he goes, no, it's because I hired a parenting coach. He literally went out and found someone to help him. So it's not about micromanaging the kid into acting how he's supposed to act. It was about my friend getting help for himself, learning how to help himself in this situation and establish the boundaries that were needed for his kid and to navigate it. And when he started doing that, automatically trickled down to his kid. And now he has this amazing, athletic, smart, capable 11-year-old who, quite frankly, if the zombie apocalypse happened, like, I want to be on that kid's team. Which, done. And he's going to handle it.
Yeah.
And it's because the parent got help for themselves, not because the parent got help for the kid.
Yes. Okay. So when I used to practice, parents would sit their kids down in front of me. And I'm a family therapist, trained family therapist. And so you are going to go to talk therapy or some kind of therapy. I'm going to plug this because family therapists are the only discipline that are not taught to look at the individual and their symptoms. They're taught to the whole situation, like the system, everybody, like the background, all the things. So parents would plot their kids, or they'd want to plot their kids down. I had a rule they couldn't bring their kid in the first session. Like, I needed it because I know how parents, like, they just have stuff to say, whether negative, positive, whatever, labels, all the things. And I would say that 99% of the time, I ended up pretty much just working with the parent because I'm like, how your child will respond to the changes you make.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I would work with the kiddos and give them skills and we'd work on things. But really, it came down to giving parents skills, educating them, giving them skills, helping them change their response pattern. It was never, I would always say, look, it doesn't matter if what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reset and give you different skills to respond differently, and you responding differently and your compassion and you understanding these things differently are going to be the thing that create the effect in your child. And that's how we had the most success in helping kids become better adjusted or respond differently, feel differently. Parents really struggle sometimes with understanding how profound just basic connection is with the children. Like my daughters, I sometimes, will have a busy couple of days and I'll realize we haven't really connected. And as soon as we connect, she completely changes her demeanor. And she experiences life differently. So there's these little things that sometimes parents don't have education around, or they get into autopilot and you make these tiny shifts and your kid's mental health is transformed from just this. And that's an oversimplification, but you know what I mean? Like,
no, is it?
Really not, right? So it's, get the support you need, and it's out there. Like if you find the right therapist, or I tell people all the time, like hire a coach or go get education yourself around this before you make any major decisions. And that is really where it starts. That's an incredible story too, because, I used to work with kiddos who were adopted or in foster care, and really the biggest piece of it was educating the parents around how to attach with your child and how to respond to your child in a way that creates safety, but also helps them learn skills and experience the natural consequences and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Okay, so the Fuck It Bucket and the Happiness Skill is your Substack. And I'd love to just hear if you have any final thoughts around cultivating happiness. Somebody who's experienced a lot of the darkness that you have, I would just love to hear how you cultivate happiness for yourself, right? And your perspective on happiness. To me, the fact that you live the way you live and you are having the life experiences that you're having after what you've gone through, that gives me hope for people. You know what I mean? And so I'd love and I'm sure you can't wrap it up in a tiny, perfect little bow for people like 5 steps, but is there any insight you can share on cultivating happiness, or should they do their yes quest? Is that where they should start?
I mean, you could try. I think I was in a position in time where I really could just, someone said, hey, you want to come to Chile? I'm like, yes, and I can do it, So it's not fully, it's maybe not fully translatable to everybody's life. You could certainly do versions of it, but it comes down to really understanding that what you want may be wrong. I think that we're kind of obsessed with the question, well, what do you want? I don't really think that anybody actually knows what they want. They want what that question is saying, what feeling do you want to experience? That question does not say, well, how do we get there? Right? So basically you're asking the wrong question and people are giving the wrong answer, because if you say to someone, what do they want? At the end of the day, people want peace. It's pretty much just it. They want peace and some sense of security. But if you say, okay, well, how are you going to get there? And no one can answer, because they're going to start off by saying, oh, well, maybe I need a job that makes me $200,000 a year and a partner and blah, blah, blah. And then nobody's ever going to think that that job means you're working 80 hours a week, and a partner means you have somebody else's bullshit you have to manage. And neither one of those things bring
I was going to say that. Not like it's gonna bring.
Yeah. So we're asking the wrong question and we're answering it in the wrong way, right? So maybe it's not about what you want. I think it needs to be more about what are you being shown? And you will be shown over and over again the thing you need to address. And you will also be shown over and over again different paths and different ways out. The key is to learn to recognize that. And that is a skill. Other than I feel like having sort of a sidekick who can basically point out, like, you realize that person or this opportunity is like asking you to step up, right? Someone who's saying, are you seeing what's happening here? Because I'm on the outside. I think that can help if you have trusted people in your life. But just the amount of, I guess when you talked about people who feel like life is happening to them, there is this shift about really kind of starting to understand that it's happening for you. It's showing you over and over again where to go.
Yes.
I mean, but people are just absolute experts in being like, no, that's not it, because it's not what I want. And walking the other way into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So drop that. Drop whatever you want. It's going to show you. People will come in, the opportunities will come in, and learn to recognize that. And that's your way out.
I love that. Drop what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Really powerful.
And there may be a point, I will say that there may be a point in the process where you do have to get more specific about what you want. But again, that's more advanced. It comes later. I'm talking about the very initial beings of like, you're depressed. Maybe you just got off your psych drugs. Your life's a mess.
Yeah.
All you know is that you just don't want to feel like this, but you don't know how your way out. So we got to start shifting. It's not about how you feel at that point, because that's going to take time. It's like, what are you being shown? If you keep getting shown crap, it's because you have to deal with that crap and you have to move that out of the way first, right? But as you start dealing with that and clearing it out, then you will start to be shown options. And then you can think to yourself, well, what do I actually want here? Do I want job A? Do I want job B? Do I want to live in this place or that place? This partner or that partner, whatever. Then you can start going into the world of what you want. But I think in the beginning, the universe can be very kind in a sense that it tends to, it's that, the quote about like, God only gives us so much as we can handle or whatever. I know that kind of gets overused, but it is a little bit more like, no, it's going to show you what is up right now. You don't need to worry about what's up 2 miles down the road. Just deal with what's up right now. And for some people, that may be like 4 major things. Other people are just going to get a little bit dealt out to them at a time. And at some point, we probably get both. But just deal with what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Clear it out. Move on.
I think that that's incredible, because we're a world obsessed with needing to know, or like you said, very much like, I want this. And people don't realize that there's a whole path.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't be, it's like that being present with the path again, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of dropping what you want for a period of time and just focusing on dealing with what is there and exploring what's there and figuring that out. It's very powerful. Like, we've moved away from that so much. We've moved away. Like, cavemen didn't think like, I want this in 6 months.
Yeah, no.
I don't even know if they measured months, right? It's just like, the day I'm going to go get food.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do this for my family. And they literally live their day by day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I love that. Okay. I'm really grateful for this conversation. I think it's been incredibly powerful. I can't wait for people to hear it. Can you tell everybody, like, I know you have it on the screen, but if they're not on YouTube, where can they find you and hang out with you?
I am not so much on YouTube, but you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Brooke Siem, BROOKESIEM as in Mary. And my name's not common, so if you Google that, you'll find me.
Love it. And I'm going to have your Instagram handle linked in the show notes. I'm going to have your book linked in the show notes and any other links that you provided. I'm really excited, and I'm so grateful that you spent this time with me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I am eternally grateful you tuned into The Truth About Mental Health. If this message matters to you, please spread the word by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with someone who needs this knowledge. Let's keep reclaiming our mental health together.